Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Lauren Williams, Senior Editor at Defense One, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to a one-on-one interview with Ross Guckert, the Program Executive Officer for Enterprise Information Systems at the U.S. Army. In his role, Mr. Guckert manages a diverse portfolio of 36 program offices and 71 acquisition programs that span everything from Army and DoD communications and logistics to medical, finance, personnel training, procurement systems, all of it, you name it, it's under his umbrella. We're excited to have him here today and catch us all up on what his office has been up to. And without further ado, I want to bring on Ross. Ross, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Lauren. Great to see you again, and appreciate the opportunity to catch up.
Yes, no, for sure. Last time we chatted, I was with FCW. We talked a bit about what it was like being in your seat for the first time. You've had 2 years since then, a whole pandemic that's not quite over, but I think the hard part is over. So tell us a little bit about what your priorities are this year in 2022 and what we can expect from you.
Yeah, sure. So we've been doing cloud migrations the past 2 years. I think when we first talked, we were in the process of doing GFEBs or might have finished doing that. So since then, we've moved both ASIP Hub and LMP Logistics Modernization Program, and we're working on G-Army now. So a lot of progress in migrations, and we continue to do that as a priority within the Army. But my other priorities, we probably talked about last time, IPS-A, Release 3, AIE, Accessions Information Environment, Army Contract Writing System, Enterprise Business Systems Convergence, and the last one I probably spend a lot of my time on is the Unified Network. And so with IPS-A, we are pushing out Release 3 this September as we add the active and reserve components over a million users. We've overcome a lot of challenges with the architecture, the data, the interfaces. We're right in the middle of limited user testing, and so we're anxious to push that next release out to all 3 components in September. With AIE, Accessions Information Environment, we're on the cusp of getting Wave 1 out the door next year. We have taken a truly agile approach in delivering that capability with multiple releases as part of each wave. User acceptance test is scheduled for early in 2023, followed by that deployment of Wave 1. Army Contract Writing System, we have officially pivoted to the Air Force's solution called CON-IT. And we're working with the Navy and the DLA, Defense Logistics Agency, who's representing the entire 4th Estate. So all the services in the 4th Estates are now coming together and converging on a single solution. So you can imagine the cost efficiencies we're going to see with all of those. And the maturity of the CON-IT solution allows us to push our first, what we call minimum viable product out next year in the 3rd quarter in 23. So we're anxious for that. EBSC is the largest probably business system effort ever undertaken in the Army. The requirement has been completed since we last talked. BPR, Business Process Reengineering, that initial phase has been completed. And we in the acquisition community have put out a draft, what's called a PPON, Prototype Project Opportunity Notice, which is like an RFP, but under an OTA construct. So that's on the street. We look forward to industry's comments, have an industry day to follow that, and we look towards those OTA awards for prototyping to be done in 3rd quarter of 23. So we're excited to see what industry has to offer there. And then finally, the Unified Network. We are playing a critical role in that. We do the enterprise element of the Unified Network that's connecting the tactical to the enterprise in a seamless, secure, integrated single network. The Army has the Unified Network plan out there, and we're doing a number of initiatives to implement the Unified Network plan, SIPR modernization, voice modernization, net modernization. They're all underway. Under SIPR modernization, that's 4 phases, and we'll push out commercial solutions for classified technologies, virtual desktop desktop infrastructures to all users in the Army. In voice mod, we're getting rid of a majority of our hard phones that are on desk, and we're going to have soft clients replacing them. And for net modernization, we're going to go and touch our camps, posts, and stations. We have 288 of them in the Army, so we're going to modernize those with fiber, new servers, switches, and routers to implement the unified network plan. So those programs I talked about take up a lot of my time and effort. I spend a lot of time with senior leaders as we look to get those capabilities out.
You gave me a lot to pull on there, but I want to start with one of the last things you said about the network modernization of the post camps and stations. What will that look like? I know that there's been some chatter. I think there might have been like a Twitter thread out there about service members being frustrated with the lack of connectivity. How will these modernization efforts kind of ease some of those concerns?
Yeah, so I think some of the things we're working on early is the requirements for the unified network. So there's an ICD out there, and that's going to be followed by a number of requirement development packages, RDPs, and they will define everything from NetOps, what kind of NetOps tools are we going to use at the tactical and enterprise level, ICAM solutions, and how we touch those camps, posts, and stations is also going to be dependent on the funding that becomes available. So we're positioning ourselves with the right contract vehicles so we can move out as soon as those requirements and those that money becomes available. But you should see connectivity from the tactical to the enterprise. And right now, you don't have that holistic single network. And so what the unified network plan does is create that single network. And so you're using the same tools, whether you're in the tactical or whether you're at the enterprise side, and you're having that connectivity from the tactical back to the enterprise, whether it's reach back for data, artificial intelligence, data analytics, whatever the requirement is, either and through the cloud or through other means. It will now be connected so the soldiers have access to data regardless of where it's at in the network, not just at the tactical edge. And that's what the enterprise network piece will give to it. And the net mod that we're doing will help enable that connectivity.
And do you have a timeline for when those improvements should be live or start rolling out?
Yeah, for SIPR modernization, we're moving out this year for that initial phase and pushing out. We're identifying the sites we need to touch and the architecture that we're going to do. And so the SIPR modernization is moving out phase 1 this year. Voice mod, the same thing. I think we're touching 3 different installations starting and move to other installations, but that's also starting this year. And net modernization has been an ongoing effort. And you can imagine we have 288 camps, posts, and stations. So there's a process of prioritizing those, and then whatever funding's available, we go down that priority list and we touch those sites over time. So we've been doing that ongoing as well.
And so I think it goes without saying that security, particularly cyber, goes hand in hand with these modernization efforts. Can you talk a little bit about how defensive cyber operations has kind of played a role in these acquisition efforts?
Yeah, under my portfolio, we do defensive cyber. The other portfolios, they'll do offensive cyber, and some at the tactical level. We do it at the enterprise level. So we have both mobile platforms as well as garrison platforms that manage the tools, the cyber tools that address the threat. But what's really impressive about defensive cyber operations that we do here within my portfolio, it's an embodiment of rapid, agile, and innovative acquisition. If you think of the 3 legs of the acquisition stool, requirements, funding, and small A acquisition, what we do, we've addressed all of those to get at streamlining the delivery of capability to address the threat. So for requirements, we're using what's called an IT box. which generates smaller requirement development packages or RDPs that are categorized at the ACAT 3 and 4 level. So the decision making for those has been pushed down to the lowest levels. For funding, we use a pilot called BA8, Budget Authority 8, which is a colorless appropriation. It allows us to use that for any type of effort, whether it's assessing, developing solutions, fielding solutions, or sustaining them, which are typically 3 different colors of money. This is a colorless appropriation, so it allows us to do that. And we can't plan for the threats and the solutions we're going to need 2 years out, like is required by the PPBE process. So having a colorless appropriation allows us to address the threat in real time, whether it's developing a solution, whether it's fielding a solution, or whether it's sustaining a solution, and allows us to keep ahead of the threat. And so that's really innovative, and we're trying to model that in other areas, not just in our portfolio, but across the Army.
And I want to take, since you mentioned the BA8, the software pilot effort, but I want to go back a little bit to the other transaction authorities and your use of them. That's something that I think viewed across the Defense Department, there's been an uptick in the use of other transaction agreements because people say it helps them buy things faster. So I'm interested in, when you're talking about enterprise technologies, how that's helped PEO EIS meet its missions.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of OTAs. We use them wherever they're applicable to a great extent. So we can quickly get what's the equivalent of an RFP, what I mentioned earlier is a PPON, quickly get that on the street. We can make awards quickly. We can do prototyping quickly, and we can make decisions if we want to, if it's mature enough to go into production. And we can go into production with an OTA or a FAR-based production. But all that is a very quick process to prototype solutions and to get them quickly into the hands of soldiers with the platforms that we have.
Is there any concern, or are you taking any preparation for increased scrutiny of the use of these authorities? I know Congress has, expanded the Defense Department's authorities when it comes to acquisition to help it buy technology specifically faster. But sometimes more use means more oversight. So are you preparing for that in any sort of way?
Right now, it's a tool in our toolbox, Lauren. I think if that oversight comes down, we'll have to manage that and accept it. But right now, it's a valuable tool in the toolbox. I hope we can communicate that to the Hill because I think part of the intent was to take away some of the oversight so we could execute quickly. But I understand the Hill's concern, and so we will adjust as the requirements come down from the Hill for potential more oversight.
I want to pivot just quickly to workforce. Technology is fun and all of that, but you can't get things done without people. So what sort of workforce initiatives is PEO EIS working on?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. When we last spoke, I was just understanding really what the need was for certain skill sets. And so we've put a number of initiatives together. Enhanced command preparation is one of the ones. It's a pilot that we're working with ASALT, and what that does is for the leaders that are selected to come into our portfolio, they'll get selected 2, maybe even 3 years out. And during those 3 years before they get in the seat, we do developmental assignments, training with industry. We'll do senior service college, course offerings, and that's tailored to the portfolio and the type of work they're going to inherit. And so they get 1, 2, even 3 years maybe of preparation before they get into the seat. And so we're really excited about that pilot. We've had one person go through it already, another in it as we speak. The other thing is something we call boot camps. As We get new folks coming to the portfolio. We send them through immersive training with boot camps to understand whether it's the business mission side of the house, how to manage those business systems, or the network side of the house, how we develop and deliver network capabilities and defensive cyber capabilities. And so that has proven effective with new leaders that are coming in. The other thing I put in place was a compass tool. And this tool assesses new leaders as they come in. It assesses their skill sets through a number of questions. And based on the answers, we understand their skill sets, but more importantly, where there might be gaps. And then we tailor a program to fill those gaps quickly so they don't have to learn it on the job. So I think it's a valuable tool because I think we have a very unique portfolio that requires a unique skill set, from people that manage business systems, which other PEOs typically don't do, to now data scientists, cloud engineers, software developers, agile subject matter experts. And we are putting a program together to recruit and retain those types of skill sets, but also creating tracks within the Army and growing them from within. So identifying the right folks, identifying the training and education experience they need, investing in those folks, and then making sure we have those skill sets, because we're competing with not just industry, but across the Army and the other services and agencies for those types of skill sets as they become more and more popular and needed in every portfolio.
So this Compass tool, is this something separate, or is it part of the integrated personnel and pay system, or IPSA? Because I know that there were modifications being done to that related to talent management.
It's a separate tool that we developed within EIS, and it's really focused on the unique requirements, the unique programs that we have that no other portfolio in the Army has. But it's a separate tool than IPSA.
Okay. Is there anything similar being done with IPSA when it comes to talent management in that same vein as the Compass tool?
Yeah, I think the intent of IPSA, one of the capabilities will be to identify what skill sets are required, and then what soldiers have those types of skill sets to do a match. Mm-hmm. So I believe that capability will be part of IPSA when we push it out.
Okay, but that wouldn't be for the September iteration, or no?
It should be. So, because the release 4 is really the pay aspect of the personnel and pay piece. So release 3 cover all the personnel piece. So it should be part of release 3 that comes out in September.
And, I feel like when we talk about, or when I talk about workforce, or I'm listening to people talk about it, I feel like AI comes in a lot, because using artificial intelligence to be able to kind of help employers find those gaps, I think is something that the technology can be used for. Is that something that you're seeing, or that Army PEO EIS is considering with its own internal processes?
Yeah, I'm really open to whatever AI tools that can help us. I think the key is to understand what's available from industry that's going to speed up, better inform the decision-making process, the hiring process, while adding efficiencies and savings. I know the Accessions Information Environment program that we're going to push the first wave out next year. We'll use AI to look at the best locations to recruit the best soldiers. So they're using a tool with that program. For enterprise business systems convergence, we're looking forward to industry's recommendations on what type of AI tools are available out in industry that we can bring in and use for that converged solution. But we are always open, and we meet with industry, whether myself or my leaders, literally every day, different industry partners, to understand what's available. And so I'm always open for those solutions that are going to help us be more successful in our mission, Lauren.
And dealing with legacy systems, and you have these ever-changing software solutions like AI. Like, how do you have any sort of, I guess, insights or lessons learned there from your perspective with enterprise information services?
With the legacy systems, you mean?
Yeah, trying to incorporate newer technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, to, I guess, make better use of some of the data that is emitted from legacy systems.
Yeah, I believe they are, like I said, always looking at solutions that we can apply even to the legacy systems. I think there's some bots and possibly AI that's used as part of the GFib system. But robotic process automation, typically called bots, are always looked at on automating the process so we can take the human out of the loop, so we can streamline the time to decision and add efficiencies to the process. So the team is not just looking forward on future programs we're going to deliver, but also on those legacy systems. Are there opportunities to apply the AI tools, the bots, et cetera, to those? Because they're still going to be around for a number of years until we achieve that converged solution. So I think that makes sense as we sustain those legacy systems as well.
Related, but maybe just a bit tangential, I want to talk a little bit about data and where data flows into to Army BEO EIS. What is your approach to dealing with the hordes of data that comes out of the systems that you help develop and procure?
Yeah, so our key is to make sure we treat data as a strategic asset. It's a priority of the SEC Army. I think when we talked, I was in the process of standing up the PM for Army Data and Analytics Platform, or RDAP, so we can design around the Army's priorities in anticipation of the Army, the data plan coming out of the Chief Data Officer's office. Vantage, as you know, falls under PM RDAP, the Army Data Analytics and Visualization Platform, using authoritative sources. We have ASIP Hub, which manages a lot of data for the Army as well. But other programs have the separate elements of data and data analytics, and we're building the foundation that will allow for 3 core data services. The first is data brokerage, delivering platforms that make the data accessible through automated and open standards. Data management, delivering expertise, processes, and technology that make the data useful and support the Army data strategy, making it vaultless, visible, accessible, understandable, linked, trusted, interoperable, and secure. And then data analytics, whether it's self-service for the user and analytic tools, or analytics as a service expertise that enable inform strategic decisions through data insights. So the Army is also in the process of designing, if you will, the Army data mesh, our fabric, and that architecture, and what that will look like, and how that will inform us and the rest of the Army, how we design for and manage its data. And so we're looking to industry and their ideas on how best to design that Army data fabric. There's a data layer, there's an analytics layer, there's probably an API layer, integration layer, an agility layer that brings in the best of breed from industry. So how, which pieces of those are part of EBSC convergence and which aren't, and how does that look like from an Army data mesh architecture, and inform how we are then going to move out and delivering our capabilities within EIS.
We have a few minutes left, but I have loads more questions for you, so I want to get in as many as I can. I want to broaden it out just a little bit. Can you talk about the landscape, or the enterprise IT landscape, and trends that you're seeing, particularly in defense IT and digital transformation modernization? I know the Army is in the midst of that, as you mentioned. But talk to me about what you're seeing from a a big picture sort of view?
Yeah, the first thing I noticed in the Army was they separated the CIO from the G6. And so we have a separate CIO, from our Dr. Iyer. Really allows us to focus on policy, architecture, alignment to deliver the unified network from the requirements to the implementation from the tactical to the enterprise. I see a huge cybersecurity focus. All our applications go through the RMF process. I see a big investment in defensive cyber in our portfolio. So again, the cyber focus. I see a convergence of applications. So our EBSC program is a result of that. I'm seeing more modular or composable designs versus monolithic, highly customizable designs like we've seen in the past with ERPs. We are following industry's lead to make sure we design so that we can always have the best of breed integrated into our solutions. Agile methodologies are becoming more and more popular to deliver capability. So we're learning, how do we write the best statement of work or performance work statement? How do we contract well for agile delivery? How do we execute, and then how we measure and see ourselves through the right metrics? And then finally, automation. We talked about AI and ML, but also robotic process automation, I think, are some trends that we're seeing across defense for digital transformation.
And I guess back to, or part of this, but also back to the business systems migrations and cloud migrations. What sort of lessons have you learned, or what changes have you seen as these more like these larger, more overarching transformations and strategies are rolled out there, and how does that affect you? I know that might be a lot, but
well, yeah. So we've learned a lot from the cloud migrations, and every time we do one, we learn more. We make mistakes each time, but we learn from them and apply them moving forward. So some of the things we've learned is really making sure you have a solid migration plan up front. What's the architecture? What's the license agreements? What's the methodologies and networking and interfaces? Are those established and defined up front? Engaging with stakeholders, the functionals and the end users on a regular basis to set expectations. Clearly defined roles and responsibilities with the cloud service provider, making sure they have dedicated engineering support. And then during the migration itself, virtual collaboration platforms like Army 365 are critical. You can't over communicate when you're doing a migration. And we have to minimize turnover. Certain skill sets are absolutely needed and essential for migrations, and they're unique and they're hard to find. And we've seen high turnover. And so how do we get ahead of that and recruit and then retain those skill sets to see us through the entire migration? Cybersecurity requirements we talked about, we got to make sure those are understood and implemented from the onset. Preparing and training the workforce with the new cloud-based system is huge in changing the culture. And then comprehensive testing, and especially load testing. We've learned this really reduces our risk and helps us understand what really needs to be fine-tuned before we go live.
Awesome. And we have just about 2 minutes left. So I want to wrap up and put you on the spot and ask you, what are 2, 3, or 3 things that you hope to accomplish in fiscal year 2023? It's right around the corner. We're in the middle of, NDAA, or the Defense Policy Authorization Bill is being drafted as we speak. So I want to know what you're looking ahead to for next year.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's hard to narrow it down to 2 or 3, so I might add 1 or 2 because we have so much going on, right? And we didn't get to talk about the Army Ignited program, which we inherited early this year. It had some troubles getting deployed last year when it was under a different management, and so we took it over, and we're planning to push the first minimum viable solution out this September. So we're excited about that. It helps will help soldiers get paid for education and make sure the educational institutions are reimbursed. IPS-A Release 3, we talked about it this September, critical Army contract writing system, that first minimum viable product, third quarter 23. AIE Wave 1 deployed in 2023, starting prototyping for EBSC convergence in 2023. Huge momentum for the Army's unified network in those areas I talked about earlier. And then I really hope to have significant growth in the skill sets that we're looking for to recruit, retain, and grow from within the portfolio so we can continue to deliver great products.
And when you say growing the skill sets, you mean just training up your workforce?
So both recruiting, retaining, and then growing from within, identifying those individuals that can be our data scientists and cloud engineers of the future, and getting them the right education, training, experience to grow them from within and prepare them for those jobs.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. I thank you so much for joining us. Ross, you've been wonderful, and I look forward to chatting with you again. Again, I'm Lauren Williams with Defense One, and we'll see you all next time.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean Fraser, Federal CSO here at Okta. I'm here to talk a little bit about kind of IT modernization in the context of what our mission partners in DoD are dealing with, but also to talk a little bit about the inevitable security architecture around what modernization looks like. We think about security over the last many years, and I've been doing this for a lot of years. We tend to have thought of it in the way of building walls around things. So the way we do security is we put the things we care about inside the walls and we keep the bad guys outside the walls. The challenge with that is that the world has changed fundamentally over the last 10 years. And it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of organizations have kind of been struggling with, how do I have a security that meets the IT modernization and digital transformation metal that I need to get to. And some of this is around cloud adoption, basically applications and data living everywhere, the adoption of mobile, so users being everywhere. So if you think about kind of, your access of application being everywhere, your users being everywhere, and not always being on your own network. And this is kind of where we find ourselves with regards to kind of the digital transformation around security. The other problem with walls is that they tend to be really good at keeping users guessing and making the work hard on users. They don't seem really good at keeping the bad guys out. And so again, we're living all kind of in the same network. Bad guys are living right alongside of us. We're all kind of in this great thing called the internet. And we tend to build these walls and we put them in front of users and we make it harder for them to do their jobs. And the ones who actually can circumvent this stuff, they tend to do that. So there's this whole concept of shadow IT where if users are savvy enough, they can kind of work around security designs based upon the fact that they kind of know what they're doing. That also is not good. So reducing user productivity, making it harder for users, making users have to grow around what you're building. This is kind of one of those design principles of IT modernization that you have to consider when you're building out your security architectures. So one of the other things people tend to look at with security is they tend to want to buy their way out of this by buying the latest and greatest shiny thing that security vendors want to try to sell you, and they want to try to tell you that it's easy, and it's not. None of this is easy. None of the things that I talk about with regards to kind of security protections and constructs are really easy to do, and it's one of the reasons why it's so hard. And this is no different when you're talking about zero trust security, which obviously really big buzzword now. And the reason it's got such good traction is really because it's almost an inevitability based upon the fact that, again, our data is everywhere, our users are everywhere. But it also is not necessarily something you can buy. So it doesn't make it super easy. You can't just put it in a rack and turn it on and be protected. It's something you have to actually kind of roll your sleeves up and invest in. So the first part of this is that you worry about kind of, what does it mean? It means the perimeter is fundamentally changed. So it's changed from the way we used to think about perimeters. Again, think about kind of the walls around things. And it really has fundamentally moved things to focused on the data. So the data becomes the most important thing you need to protect. So if you think of things in that way, you think of the application as a steward of your data, and you think of the user as the thing that needs to come in and access the data. This is really where you start your zero trust journey and kind of work out from there. So this is important to spend a couple seconds talking about, what role we at Okta play in this. And fundamentally, we were founded ever so many years ago, about 12, 13 years ago, with the concept of connecting users to applications. And our mission really is to connect and enable any user and organization to get access to any application using any technology. So again, fundamentally in line with what we think about when we think about zero trust security or cloud security or IT modernization. These are all kind of same sides of this, or different sides of the same coin. They all kind of pertain to the same protections, the same things you're working on. So again, very much aligned to what we think about when we think about how zero trust can be an enabling security technology versus a detracting security technology. Because one of the other things, again, if you think back to the wall, someone trying to climb up the wall, is that we want to put things in place that enable folks to do their jobs. So have the right people with the right level of access, getting access to the right resources, while providing the least amount of friction as possible, and really only trying to provide the friction to the attackers and not the friction to the users. And we do this fundamentally in a kind of best of breed partnership approach, because obviously, as most folks know, Okta is an identity and access management solution. It's a little more than that, because we actually provide quite a bit of security controls within the access to applications. But we don't do this alone. We work in a very strong partnership and allegiance with some other folks who do some things in other spaces. So for example, a Zscaler or a Palo Alto or someone on the networking side, certainly a Splunk or QRadar on the SIEM side for data collection and analytics. And then on the mobile side, the mobile device side, obviously we're working with the major platform providers there. And we're working with Microsoft and Google and Apple and everybody else. So we all have a role to play in the zero trust architecture. And what we do is we sit at the beginning of this. So if you think of zero trust as kind of a journey, and there's a first step in the journey, the first step in the journey is almost always the identity. And one of the things that we can apply, some intelligence we can bring to the table is the ability to look at kind of risk signaling, both signals that we have and we know, but also signals that we get from our third-party trusted partners. So for example, we can look at the device partners and say, okay, is this device trusted? We can look at the network providers and say, is the network trusted? And again, zero trust networking means you don't trust the network, but you certainly can use the network as a signal. So if the network is compromised, we add that into the pile of risk. And then based upon that, we kind of spit out a risk score or some kind of risk signal that says, okay, the trustability of this request is suspect based upon the things that we see. So it's important to be able to kind of bring all that in, bring all the context in. And it's also important to do that at the time of need. So don't make it hard for users. Do all this stuff within a couple clicks in 10 seconds, which is usually the user expectation of access, and making sure we're doing it at the time the user tries to request access to something. So I talked about the pillars and devices being part of this. Obviously, we've been working very closely with some government standards bodies. Obviously, NIST produced the 800-207 Zero Trust guidance. These pillars actually come from CISA's guidance. So it's important to kind of look at the guidance that's out there to help you kind of navigate this journey. And our belief is we have an important role to play, certainly in Pillar 1 and probably in Pillar 2 and beyond. The phase 2 work of this has actually been worked on for the last couple of years through the NCCOE, which is the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, and that's something we've been intimately involved in. They released their first building block recently. We've actually been participating with them as the what we call the PEP or the PDP, which is the enforcement point or the decision point for access. So we think that Okta has an important role, or any ICAM solution has an important role to play there, and it's really in the first place you start when you think about leveraging zero trust. And it also helps to have all of these things aligned. So you have the executive order coming out talking about the same pillars that CISA is talking about, pointing back to these things like identity, some of these important things like multi-factor authentication, as well as secure single sign-on, utilizing phishing-resistant MFA factors to things like WebAuthn, which are more forward-leaning. It's things that you can kind of deploy in your organization. So obviously there's a lot to be had in kind of our mission partner community with the DoD. So obviously we need access for our active duty, certainly, but we also need access to for folks who are contractors or folks who are recruits or folks who are retired. So there's a whole bunch of different use cases in the enterprise of DoD that need to be supported and leveraged. So we need to make sure we're paying attention to that, not only looking at kind of the mission partners and the war fighters and looking at what they do for a living, but also looking at the enterprise itself and making sure we're protecting all of those aspects with a zero trust security model. And it doesn't hurt that Okta, certainly we are a cloud-based solution, and we are very much invested in FedRAMP and how FedRAMP aligns to Zero Trust. And we have many, many authorizations and many agencies that use our technology for just this purpose. It's important to spend a little bit of time, since we're an ICAM solution, talking about access. So obviously in the DoD world, we have our common access card. In the civilian world, we have a PIV. And those are still some of the strongest factors you can leverage out there, and still the factors that are kind of called to order if you look at the OMB guidance and other things. But obviously, there are other newer technologies you can leverage as well, and we support them all. We support kind of where you're coming from with the PIV and the CAC, but also to where you're going with WebAuthn and more future-leaning technologies in this regard. And obviously, everyone's familiar with the fact that the smart cards are awesome, but the smart cards really haven't adapted really well to mobile. So that makes them challenging. So we've created this kind of interim concept, which we call PIVD, or derived credential, which works pretty well. But again, it's kind of the more older, cumbersome PKI, and it's not leverageable as much as something like WebAuthn would be at a larger scale. The other thing important to point out, if you look at all the guidance, like OMB guidance and the guidance coming out from CISA and NSA, is that if you do have to use passwords, you want to make sure you're using a password manager. Make sure you're using strong multi-factor authentication. Obviously, WebAuthn is not using passwords, so at some point, someday, we'll actually kill the password. Not quite there yet, so until we get there, these are good constructs and things to use. Which is an important point of all of this, which is, we put a lot of weight of security on passwords, and it's really good that we're getting away from that, because obviously passwords are cumbersome. Users hate them. Users do silly things with them because we try to make them strong. They got to change them all the time. So they write them on sticky notes, put them on monitors. They share passwords across applications and all kinds of silly things, just because we've made it really hard. And we put all the onus of that security on the end user. And we need to kind of take that back and take more responsibility for it. This is one of the reasons why we've been really excited to work with our FastPass technology over the last couple of years, which we've rolled out as part of the Okta Identity Engine, which gives us kind of a frictionless way to implement this phishing resistant factor, or WebAuthn. So it's very simple to click a button, use your biometric to unlock a token to unlock your access, and then get access to your things. And also we can add additional friction here. So for example, I mentioned earlier about context. If there's something that's suspect or something that seems risky, we can add additional friction on top of this. So we can say, do a number match or do some kind of other activity. We could even add another factor of authentication. But again, not adding that friction unless it's really warranted. So if it looks risky, add the friction. If it's not, make it easy for the end user. Also important to point out that this has also got device constructs. To think about the second pillar of Zero Trust, right, is the device construct. And there is a tie-in to the device and the identity. So you have a device identity, you have a user identity. These things kind of have to be bound. And certainly when you think of things like WebAuthn, it makes it really important to have device context and device protection. So these things always become very important as you begin your journey with Zero Trust. And on that, I'll say thank you very much for attending. I appreciate it.